y'all. Welcome back to our last day, Friday, for the first week after Easter, which means we only got about 2 weeks left. So this is going to be our last day really talking about um, some of the issues with marriage and family life. We'll mention a little bit on Monday as we kind of transition into the priesthood and religious life conversations. But all of next week will be about the priesthood and that fatherhood that comes about, the spiritual fatherhood. And then the last week will just kind of be some, closing thoughts. It would in theory be your senior week, so we'll treat it the same way. We'll have a bit of a lighter week. Just some things on the horizon next Thursday again. So not this, well, not yesterday. So next Thursday will be your test, and it'll cover the marriage and family stuff with the myths of marriage, and it'll cover the priesthood stuff that we'll do at the beginning of next week. Also, I'm going to put on Canvas in a separate, it's not going to be a graded quiz, but just a survey of if you would like to meet, do like a live kind of wrap-up session where we could, actually zoom in or use the big blue button or whatever it is on Canvas. Just something to kind of, get some final thoughts out there. And then finally, I'm going to have below in the lecture notes 3 records that I have, I've picked up at various points, and we'll try to vote on those 3 records, and then I'll try to make a beat all last week with the audio from some songs on those records, and we'll see if we can't make a good beat by the end. Okay, all that out the way, what we're going to do today is a little bit different. We're not going to talk so much about fatherhood as we are about, where are you guys at right now? And the presentation that you're going to see here is kind of a condensed or a brief version of what I presented at the University of Notre Dame when I was doing my master's studies. And one of the things I was focused on, a lot of the 2 theses that I've written in my life have been about marriage and family life, and so that's kind of what I've researched the most. But what this presentation is about is not the technical side of marriage. What it is more of the what do we do right now in high school side of marriage. So kind of combining, just some of the thoughts that I've come across in teaching vocations now for 7 years, or some of just the conversations that I've had with high school students either on retreat or whatnot, even at lunch, about what it is that they really want in life. So the idea is, like, if you want to end the hookup culture, what do you do? Now, specifically, the theme of the conference that this was presented at was on mercy. So that's where you see the term mercy, but I just kind of slid that in there. It's not really integral to what we're going to be talking about, but we'll just go ahead and jump right in. Okay. So the first thing is it's a quote from my end of the year kind of response assignment. I guess, yeah, it says it on there, 2017, a couple years ago. And I don't know who said this. It's anonymous, but this is one of the responses I got from a senior at the end of the course. He said, even if I don't believe the church is teaching on marriage myself and think that you're just paid by the church to tell us the stuff, deep down between us, I think you are probably right. And this is a sentiment that I think has been communicated in various ways in your own writings, but in almost every response that I've gotten. Not every response, but a lot of the responses that I've gotten from this course is that there's this acknowledgement that, yes, I actually do think that the idea of a man and a woman being husband and wife, to be mother and father to their children, to make the family the center of your society and the center of your understanding of what's most important. This idea of self-gift, revealing your true identity, like all those things make sense, right? At the same time, there's this recognition of like, but I'm probably not gonna end up doing that, right? Like I'm probably gonna do some half part of it, which I think is interesting, right? Like that we recognize that there is this right answer out there, and yet at the same time we're kind of afraid of pursuing the right answer. So kind of boiling it down again pretty simply of what are the 3 problems that we've got going on. Now this isn't necessarily describing you or even Jesuit high school. This is 3 things distilled from just all kind of research on hooking up, especially in college, but also in high school. One of the books that we would have looked at is called The End of Sex by Donna Freitas. And it's not that she's a great Catholic writer. She's just looking at data. But her point is that what's interesting is that we have embraced the hookup culture as a normative sexual experience, but we're not satisfied by it. That we jump into it because we assume that that's what you're supposed to do, play out these unwritten scripts we've already talked about, but that it's not actually leading to happiness. And so what we find is that this weird progression there of, well, the hookup culture, that's all I have, so I'll jump into that. It's not making me happy, so I'll jump back into it even more. And then that doesn't give you the skills and virtues necessary to have a successful marriage. And so then you see the failure of marriages, and then this increased fear of the failure of marriage, right? Like I remember when I was on the 11 and 12 Biddy basketball team for then Metairie Playground, and the next year I think it was Pontiff Playground. I was so afraid of messing up because the coach was kind of scary, and I didn't want to get yelled at. That I wouldn't do anything. Like I would have this paralysis of taking the shot, so I'd always pass because I'd rather get benched for not shooting than to shoot and miss and then get benched for being bad. It's this weird fear of failure, right? The same thing is true then for marriage. That we see the study shows that people have a great fear of their marriage failing. And so rather than trying, right, and giving it everything they've got, and maybe in fact it will fail, right? Maybe you will miss the shot. Rather than giving the shot, they just stick with the hookup culture rather than the commitments necessary for a real marriage. And then what that leads to, and we kind of talked about this yesterday, is that there becomes a lack of models to emulate your behavior. One of the stats that we would have looked at is about adult adherence to religious practices beyond, emerging adulthood, and that the greatest indicator for a guy your age of what your religious practices will be beyond high school and college is whatever your father's doing right now. So if your father couldn't care less about Mass, chances are you're not going to care about Mass. If your father has some sort of commitment issues with your mom or something like that, chances are you're going to emulate those same behaviors. Now that's not always the case, right? But we talked about this a little bit yesterday with modern culture's lack of settling on one definition of marriage. You've got this this void, right, where there's not a lot of solid marriages to look up to, and so rather than emulating the good things that you see, right, you just emulate whatever is available, and that's unfortunately it's the hookup culture, right? If you think about it, if you wanted to learn to play guitar, an analogy I've probably used before, you want to emulate the best kind of guitar players. My guitar is in the corner over there. Don't emulate me. I can play the very, very basic chords and not even very well, right? But it's much easier to learn to play just very basic chords than to actually spend the years practicing guitar, daily practice every day to get better at the guitar. But if you were to try to become the best guitar player you could be, you'd want to look up to Jimi Hendrix. For me, right now I'm in a Dave Matthews kick right now. I'm re-listening to every Dave Matthews song. But if you were to if you didn't have those role models, right? If you didn't have those things to emulate excellence, then what are you left with? And so that's what you kind of see with the hookup culture, is that without these models to emulate, and without this, or motivated by this fear of failure, you just settle for something less than your best. And that returns us back to the quote from the beginning. Okay, so what is the solution? At least the solution that I came up with was this idea that we want to reawaken our students, that's you guys, desire for something, for marriage as something positive and possible, right? That you might think of it as something negative and possible, that yes, I could get married, but I want that prenuptial agreement, that security. Half of marriage is in a divorce. I'm afraid of failing at that marriage. I don't know. There's a lot of strings attached to that marriage. I want to be free to do what I want, right? So you see it in the negative light. Or you see it as positive, that there really is such a thing as a covenant marriage. There really is such a thing as unconditional love. There really is this happily ever after. But it's not possible. That's just for the movies. And so what we want to do is we want to reawaken that desire for it as something positive and possible. And now this is the part where I'm sliding into the theme of the conference is, it starts with a real encounter of mercy. And we'll see a little bit of that today, but I'm not so much concerned about that part. Okay, so just again, some more stats. The average student is involved in 2 or more hookups. The perception is 90% say yes, that within the year a student has, and when I say student, again, it means young adults, emerging adulthood, 18 to 22, something like that. The reality is that no, actually, only 37% of people have two or more hookups, whereas the majority, maybe not the vast majority, however you want to look at the graph, um, is only having maybe one, maybe none, in terms of partners that they're hooking up with. And so this perception versus reality thing gets to that point number one, where you're following these unwritten scripts as if it's the only option available, when in reality, it's not even the reality, right? But we have this weird perception that it is the reality, and therefore you try to extend it into your own reality. So what's the solution?